China's torrid pace of economic growth in recent years had come at a disturbing cost. Air pollution in Beijing has reached such an intolerable level that the local populace is protesting against the government. Fossil fuels are still the major source of energy throughout the world, and this year China became the largest importer of crude oil. Equally spoken, China is also largest provider of solar technology and is investing massive amounts in renewable energy sources. Will China morph from Saul to Paul? Will Cleantech Valley emerge in China? In the latest Globalance Bank webcast, you can learn what Reto Ringger, founder and CEO of Globalance Bank, has to say about his recent trip to China and which concrete answers he found to these compelling questions. Mr. Ringger, you just came back from an extended trip to Asia, especially to China. What are your main insights and what are the impressions that you gathered?
Yeah, one of the first impressions you have is really the challenges that China has with topics like a clean environment, traffic, infrastructure, demographics. And one of the first things you do if you exit the airport in Beijing is you download an application on the iPhone called Air Quality. So you can measure the air quality in towns like Beijing or Shanghai. Actually, the limit here in Europe is 50. And as you can see here in Beijing, actually, as we talk right now, it stands at 450, which is called hazardous. So the clean air is really a challenge in towns like Beijing. A second impression is the power of the consumer. People are making money and they want to consume. And in the contrary to, let's say, Western Europe, it's not a couple of millions, it's a couple of hundreds of millions of people that want to consume. And of course, that is creating a big negative footprint.
What are the challenges that China is facing now? Can you give us some examples, please?
Yeah, if you look at the last 10 years, the economy quadrupled in size. If you look at the next 10 years, the economy again will double. So we have a huge economic success in this area. A lot of people came out of poverty. Actually, 400 million people came out of poverty through that economic development. 200 million are part of the middle class, which is a success story. But you know, that success story also came with high costs, namely on the side of environmental degradation. Actually, the World Bank is assuming that the costs for the environment are about 9 to 10% of GDP. So China will have to invest a lot of money into the cleanup of the environment. And that will be the big topic for the next 20 to 30 years. Actually, if we look at renewable energies, the R&D budget from the United States in renewable energies is $2 billion per annum. In China, it's 80 billion, so 40 times more than actually in the United States. And China will be able to solve those issues in the next 20 to 30 years, but they need support from foreign companies.
How does the Chinese government deal with these challenges? And what are the concrete measures that are being taken right now?
Yeah, the big challenge for China is to secure growth on one side and to secure that growth with the clean environment. So that's the challenge they have. They have a different political system than we are used here in Europe or the United States. So they take top-down measurements. As an example, we saw that in the conflict between Europe, United States and China with respect to the solar technologies, with the conflict that we have. So China needs a big bang in terms of increased investments in cleaner technologies and reduction of carbon emission. And actually that is what happened last week. China announced that they will cap their carbon emission in the next 5-year plans, and that's kind of a sensation in that area.
That sounds like a really nice plan. Can you give us some concrete examples, please?
Yes, let's look at two areas, on the energy side and on the mobility side. On the energy side, since this year, China has become the largest importer of oil. So they have to import huge amounts of oil every year. Despite the fact that still 70% of the energy consumption comes from coal in China. So they have two challenges in that respect. One is the securitization of the supply of energy for the next 20, 30 years. And the second one is clean air. And that is not only renewable energy or water, it's mainly coal. So how can we burn coal in a more cleaner way? If we look at mobility, then they have taken some very specific measurements. One is they have in Beijing a huge buyback program for old cars. If you buy a greener car, you get a reimbursement of $3,000 for the old car. Another example is that the big oil companies, they get tax incentives for cleaner gasoline. So they have an advantage if they sell the cleaner version of the gasoline. And actually in Shanghai, if you buy a car, you still need a plate to drive it. They are being auctioned, and actually the price for such a plate is $14,000. So you have a very high price for mobility as well.
Now, what's the advice you give to your customers? How do they have to invest in these developments, and what do they have to look out for?
Yeah, I think an important aspect is that it's not only one sector that will benefit from that big bang. It's several sectors. It's high tech, it's recycling, it's service industry, it's infrastructure building. So there are a lot of sectors that will benefit from that. But there are mainly three topics that are important for investor. First thing is invest with a broad diversification. Secondly, invest in different sectors. And thirdly, invest with a local manager. So on the first topic, on the broad diversification, Chinese companies are different than what we know here in the Western world. Quite often the government or even the military is a shareholder in the company, and they might have a different objective with the company than the shareholders do have. Secondly, the accounting standards are much lower, are different. We recently had some scandals in the accounting standards of Chinese companies. And the third topic is that there is less transparency overall from the companies. So that is very different, and that's why you have to invest with a wide diversification. On the sectors, also there, we saw that the role of the government will increase over time. They will take decisions which will influence the business model of companies. Quite often such decisions cannot be anticipated, and that's why you have to invest across different sectors. That's very important. And the third important element is local managers. Actually, there's a good example of Fidelity Fund Management, the big fund management company that sent one of their most experienced portfolio managers 3 years ago to China. Anthony Bolton. He has a very long investment track record to set up a small and mid-cap Chinese fund. And he just came back because he was not successful. And he passed the fund to a local manager. So that is why we at Globalance Bank invest with local managers.
So how do you find these local managers? I assume they don't fall from heaven.
No, unfortunately, they don't fall from heaven. They're very difficult to find, especially if you want to integrate them also social and environmental aspect. Actually, we are quite long in that field, so we know a couple of investment managers that do that. One of our partners is First State, which is a firm based in Singapore and also in China. And they integrate social and environmental aspects to a certain extent. I met them on my trip to Asia quite recently and asked them a question, what's the strategy of China with respect to these environmental issues? And we can have a look now at the answer that we got from them.
China is very top-down, so if the government thinks that renewable is the way to go, it will happen. They are taking some serious steps. The amount of capacity they're building out is in absolute terms is quite high compared to what Europe has done in the past or what the US has done in the past.
Did you also talk about the energy issues of China?
Of course, that is a major topic, and we also have an answer here on that question.
So Gas China is owned by a group in Hong Kong, and they're building out a network of gas pipelines that deliver gas to households and to industries, which hopefully replaces dirty coal and reduces pollution.
What about specific companies?
Yes, there are a couple of interesting companies, and actually he describes one of them.
If you look at a company like Uni-President, which is into making noodles and beverages, and they sell bottled beverages in China, and they're the second largest noodle manufacturer as well in China. You naturally think they're not, they will not be that environmentally constrained, but they are. They import a lot of palm oil for their noodles business, and a lot of that comes from Indonesia, and they have to think a lot about their supply chain as well. Now, it's not environmental issues in China, but it's an environmental issue in Indonesia. So when we speak to the president, we talk about what their supply chain looks like, who are they sourcing from, are they doing regular audits on their supplier. These are issues, and even we recently met with the CEO of Uni-President a couple of weeks ago, and he was mentioning time and again that the Chinese government's tolerance towards any poor behavior on the environmental side is absolutely zero now.
This is a very good example that shows that you can combine environmental and societal factors with investment decisions. Actually, they do that with a very high success. The performance is outstanding, and that is one reason why we are investing with them as well.
Mr. Ringger, Green China, wishful thinking, what is your conclusion?
I think China is actually triggering this big bang that it desperately needs to combine economic growth and a clean environment. Second is there are a lot of sectors that are being affected by that. If you think of mobility, energy, infrastructure, we have seen that. And thirdly, it is very important to invest with local managers, as we from Globalance do that. So if you can combine performance with a positive footprint, then you also can enjoy your investments.
Thank you very much for this interesting conversation. The webcast you can see as usual on the webpage of the Globalance Bank. Enjoy investing!